Welcome to Focus on Fuels, brought to you by StoneX. Your hosts are Trevor McClanahan, Risk Manager, and Alex Hodes, Director of Market Strategy from the StoneX Energy Desk. Alex and Trevor help fleet managers, fuel buyers, and energy procurement specialists gain control of fuel costs, boost margins, and keep their businesses competitive. Join them for another deep dive into the volatile energy markets.
Remember that the trading of derivatives such as futures, options, and over-the-counter products or swaps may not be suitable for all investors. Derivatives trading involves substantial risk of loss. Past results are not necessarily indicative of future results.
Welcome back, everybody, to Focus on Fuels. I'm your host, Alex Hodes.
And I'm Trevor McClanahan. Thanks for joining us today. We've had a little time off, but definitely not time off of work. It's been a very busy and active last few weeks, and I don't think we need to elaborate on why. Today we've got our colleague joining us today in the conversation, John Wenzel. He is also he's a senior risk management consultant here, and he has a unique combination of experience and expertise. He before joining us at StoneX, he was a submarine officer, submarine command officer, was specialized in wargaming. And he under the Navy, so he had 7 years of active duty and 15 years of reserve duty with about 1,000 days of active war game experience. So he's joining us today, give us some really good insight on obviously got a great combination of experience that we can utilize and pick his brain on here today. So thanks for joining us, John.
Thanks for having me here.
Yeah, so got a lot of people. There's a lot of different moving parts in this conversation right now with our obviously very active and fluid situation. So we want to pick your brain on just the military and the Navy aspect of things, especially today. There's a ton of energy news out there and kind of speculation on what's going to happen next. But I think with your experience in the military and Navy, you can give us a little bit more perspective on kind of the whole Strait of Hormuz situation. I think the big question everybody's asking right now is why is the U.S. Navy not escorting these oil tankers, and just give us some more color around that whole concept right now.
And before we actually get going on this interview, I would like to state that it is the 23rd of March, so this situation evolves every single second, so just to keep that in mind. So over to you, John.
Yeah, when we're talking about escorting the ships through the strait, it came up almost right away, and there's some discussion of, well, do we have enough ships or not? And for me, just my background, I would go with, like the last time I went out to help with an active duty exercise, did what's called a Computex with USS Lincoln. And anyway, we were the red team and basically did, enemy forces. And one of the things that any strike group ships coming into an area, they need to stay, outside of a land-based anti-ship missile system. And that's really important because even though the ships can shoot down incoming missiles, those aren't 100% foolproof, and a captain isn't going to put his sailors in danger, unless he really has to. And in this case, to transport a cargo of oil, that doesn't meet, the hurdle to take your ship in there in harm's way. And we know that Iran has just literally stockpiles of anti-ship missiles. You can look online. It's just something you can Google. And in 2010, Iran launched just a series of missiles from trucks onto ships in that area. So they've got a ton of assets to do that. And when I think of, if people are going, well, we can escort ships, or even the president has urged people, let's get on with that mission. But even, why is it not happening? It's because it's not safe to take a ship in that area with all the anti-ship missile systems they have.
Interesting. Yeah. So I think that's kind of the important part of that. And I mean, just for context too, since it's been a while since we've been on the podcast, there are some routes where like Saudi Arabia can export product from the East to West pipeline that they developed. And, there's a lot of information out there as far as, how much they can actually do that. Um, and Kuwait and Iraq are the big two producers right now that are basically shutting off their exports. Iraq has been able to move some product through Turkey up to about 1 million barrels per day. But I think overall, Alex, I think you can maybe give us a little bit of color on the total amount of product that is and crude oil that is getting exposed here and kind of where the market sits as today.
Yeah, I think that's putting it into perspective and why we're kind of focusing solely on this and why everybody in the oil market is focusing solely on this subject is just that initially it was a 15 million barrel per day supply outage with regards to crude oil. It's around 20 million barrels per day when you include products. And this has been just, I guess we're at day 23 here. There's been some evolution with some circumventing the strait. Saudi Arabia, the capacity of this is kind of in question, but the loadings at Yanbu port on the west side of Saudi Arabia were averaging about 4.5 million barrels per day. So that's some barrels that are escaping, but really as long as this strait is closed, the oil market's just in a massive supply shortage. So that's why we have John here talking about kind of what the next steps are and what could possibly be done with regards to the strategy in opening up the strait.
Yeah, I'll kind of jump in and throw some extra color around, the anti-ship missile systems and what you see. There was talk about the Marine Expeditionary Unit coming in and taking some islands to help, thwart those anti-ship missile systems they might have. One of the things that I see is basically the doorstep to the straits, or right in the neck of it there, is Keshem Island, which has 150,000 people. It's 60 miles long, 5 miles wide. We know they have enormous stockpiles underground, but we have to give them credit that they're not going to just leave them there. And or part of what they've shown in military exercises is all their systems are very mobile. So, you have a small building somewhere, there could be a truck with 3 or 4 anti-ship missiles just sitting, waiting. And we've also seen that as they respond out there, like some of those systems and where they have placed them haven't been used extensively when they have struck some of the shipping. Some of the shipping's been hit by, drone boats type thing. There has been some hit by, they say projectiles, probably an anti-ship missile system, both at the entrance and exit of the strait. But right in the strait where, you're literally, the channel's only a mile wide, and it's 4 or 5 miles from Keshem Island. You just don't know where something's going to come from. I know a gentleman who's an Army colonel, and he went to the War College, and I asked him about boots on the ground type stuff, and I thought you'd have to go in and occupy the land to make sure these anti-ship missiles wouldn't come. And I think the military, whether it's Army, Marines, or those kind of people, we hear a lot of reluctance with boots on the ground. In any kind of, Keshem Island with 150,000 people, those Marines got these nice tilt rotor Ospreys coming in, 24 Marines in there. They jump out, can probably do a lot of damage, hit their mission like they did in Venezuela, but they also want to come back out. And so to try eradicate that island of all the anti-ship missile systems, I think would just take a persistent ground force that it's unlikely the military would want to do right now. But then, that begs the next conclusion is like, how do you even reopen it? That's been my concern because I don't see a way where our military, I mean, they're not even transiting it through it now. Um, and we've taken out their Navy, but now spoiler alert, their Navy's stunk, and it's not really what they're relying on to close the strait anyway, right? It's all these systems on land.
So one thing that has kind of been, so I guess my question is this, we've never really seen the strait get closed, even in decades past, when tensions were flaring. It's always been kind of a threat. Is it now that these cheap drones and other things have become a lot more easy to produce, or what's kind of been the change point as to why Iran now has the capabilities, and how this nation that we had thought potentially wouldn't have as great of a military assets, or ability to actually close this? Is there some advancement in technology? What's been the kind of change, I guess, that made people think that we couldn't really do this, or that they couldn't close the strait, and then now we're seeing it happen? Is it the drones itself, or a combination of things?
Those Shahed drones are definitely something that even when I talk about, I mentioned anti-ship missile systems. We know that Iran's been making them for 15 years. They show it off. I think maybe I already mentioned it, shooting from the shore. But they've been building those and stockpiling them for a long time. They didn't have that before. Back in the 80s in the Iran-Iraq war, a U.S. Navy ship did get hit by an anti-ship missile then also, and one of them ran into a mine, right? But what's changed since then is the fact that they have much more of those, and they're not only so effective. Then you go to what is it, probably last 4 or 5 years with the Ukraine wars kind of brought to the forefront these Shahed drones, and one of the strikes that they did, I think it was on the UAE anyway. The Iranians released the camera footage of one of these Shaheds just, circling around, picking its target, and then finally diving into where it goes. And that means that, they flew that thing. The more modern ones can have, guidance by a pilot, just like our Reapers and some of the drones we have. So now that's not all of them. And a lot of the ones that they're probably expelling on different sites, you give it a GPS coordinates and it's just going to go there and hit that. It's more sophisticated to be able to, hit a moving ship or something. And some of the strikes we've seen on ships, you'll notice a lot of them have been not moving. That's an easier target. But we also know that they can hit moving ones because they've basically shown us that with that video, having somebody's piloting it and circling around before it comes in and gets you, right? Yeah, that's going to be a problem.
What about, so there's kind of been talk on mines in the strait, and like there was a threat that Iran was laying mines, and then it said that they were just making a threat that they were laying mines, and then it's kind of gone back and forth. But I saw another headline just come across right before we came in here that there are mines there. How does that, I guess, kind of change the thing with the calculus with Iran allowing some ships to pass through and whatnot? And are there actually mines in the strait? What's kind of the strategy there, I guess?
Well, I've heard some comments that say, that they wouldn't do it because, mines can be, you can hit your own ships. But mining 101 is you put a dot where you threw the mine in the water, right? And you share it with the people that want to know where they're at. So far as Iran's concerned, that's not an issue. I wouldn't think they would put them in the shipping lanes. We hear that, they're still allowing their boats to go through, and, voila, they all of a sudden they've doubled the price of oil that they can get, and business is good for them, right? So they don't want to shut down the strait and put mines like in the lane, because the lane isn't, what I've seen is it isn't wide enough for anything to be able to, be that picky. One of the interesting things when you talk about how narrow those shipping lanes are too, that makes it really hard to escort, because our big ships, going side by side of a big oil tanker. And it's strange, but think of an oil tanker. Um, it takes 30 minutes to stop in like several miles. So, if you want to run a chain of these guys through the strait, you're going to have to run them really slow, because if for some reason the guy in front of you gets hit, if the guy behind you takes 30 minutes to stop, you can't run very fast, right? You got to slow everybody down. And then, even then, if it comes from a weird angle, just a Shahed drone off of the back of a car on Ketchum Island, and all of a sudden my anti-ship missile, and a lot of all our warships have phalanx, kind of a Gatling gun type system that when something gets close, it could shoot it, which would probably be the best defense for those things. But unless then you're almost going to need a Navy warship, whether it's, France is sending a bunch there, other countries, President Trump has asked for people to send stuff for that mission, and that might be ultimately helpful. But France has already said, and along with the other nations, is they want a ceasefire, so they're more of a safety net instead of a first line of defense for those ships going through.
This might be a silly question, but are there any kind of like drone vehicles that can go through and maybe clear the lane of, or at least monitor the lane of if there's mines within that strait? So you got just a ship that goes through there, no humans on the ship, and it's basically just detecting whether or not the lane is safe or not, that you know of at least.
Not particularly. There's mine warfare, or at least undersea mine warfare, has kind of been something the United States has not spent much research effort on. I will say that here's an interesting side one, but I got to spend 3 or 4 months up in Seattle with basically the drone Deveron 5, which makes all the drones and stuff. So yes, they do have things that will they almost look like a torpedo, but it's it's technology that's actually taken from deep oil platform things, where this system can go with a side scan sonar and just very accurately map something. But just think, it's probably still only going 4 or 5 knots. So to cover a large area, and maybe it can, uh, uh, I'm going to say maybe 50 yards to 100 yards, clearance sweep. And I mean, it's going to find anything that's there, but that's going to be tough to do continuously. And do a big area. Like when you think of a big area going 4 miles an hour, it's going to be a little tough. And I don't know that those. I have seen specifically something, and nothing I say is going to be confidential, because and at this point too, I've been out for a couple of years, so I'm not sure that. But like one of the projects that those things did that I seen specifically was in San Diego. They were changing some of the piers, and it's those systems are designed for, let's say, a SEAL team going into a port, and they want to, they're swimming underwater. They need to find all the details of a bottom. It would be good for mines too. It's just you need the scope and scale of how many you would need, and then also the operators that do this stuff. Like currently, these kind of underwater drone operations are a unique skill set in the Navy. That's, like I said, SEAL teams, this or that. It's hard to deploy them to do a commercial shipping clearance type mission. I would think. I'm not sure, but
Something kind of like a Roomba,
yeah.
like one of those vacuums. So I guess with all that being said, what are the next steps? You mentioned boots on the ground. As each day progresses, we're getting a 12 to 14 million barrel per day shortage in the oil market. So it seems to me that the pressure will be on to kind of end this. And right now we're seeing President Trump kind of state that they had spoke with Iranian leaders, and then Iran comes out and says they haven't spoke. So if peace is not an option. So just going down that route, if Iran just wants to kind of make this thing last as long as possible, what are the next steps from a military standpoint? How can you reopen the strait?
Ooh, yeah. My suspicion is now that you're going to have a more persistent presence, boots on the ground to keep these people from shooting. They could be like, if you go to that area, and some of it's mountainous and whatever terrain, but you've got to make sure there aren't people there with one of those devices ready to go. First, the Shahed drones are even worse, but I think maybe because they're slow flying, you and interestingly, I'm sure some people have seen it, but Ukraine has come into the mix because they've got the anti-drone drones, right? They're cool little things that will take off and just hunt and spear these things. The Shahed drones, the slower ones, the big white wings that we see, the bat wing things. The anti-ship missile systems, though, you really need like guided missile cruiser, and we only have a handful of those, right? So that's going to always be a tough thing. And so I really don't have an answer of what's next, other than I'm worried that there isn't a good solution, right? That Iran's kind of, I joked the pun intended, that's their trump card. Like, and I don't think President Trump knows it quite yet. But they're not like, how do you get rid of all that stuff? And it's, maybe Iran, with maybe it gets to a point where somehow we have to make them cry uncle, or give them some kind of a deal so that they quit doing that.
Right, because it's kind of at this point, we have, two different definitions of victory. From our end, from the U.S.'s end, it's a lot more complicated, more difficult to find kind of where the victory lies. From their end, it seems like it's just survival at this point, and they've got geography working in their favor, and just less to lose, I guess. So, I mean, like diplomatic solutions, is there anything off the top of your mind that would, that you could see in the near future that would, some sort of off-ramp here? From a diplomatic standpoint, I know militarily it doesn't seem like there's much, but what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I guess I'll try and think of something positive, right? But one of the things that I haven't seen, and one of the things you see different in the military and in the way President Trump is approaching this situation, you know, we're a little bit, bragging and make sure we're like bringing the full force on them and telling them we're going to do that at some point. I think they'd have to, come back and treat Iran a little bit as a partner in the negotiations, and come from a stance where Iran will be able to save face. And because, on the top of it, I don't know why Iran's still sticking with their, they want to have nuclear enrichment. But that doesn't, you could get it from somebody else, right? They want to have all these ballistic missile systems. And then the one thing that will never happen, though, is, when you think of, I shouldn't say that, but I think of the regime change thing too. I think that's a little bit of a false story, because it seems to me that not only do the protesters not have guns, a lot of the protesters, while they are, the majority of the population is Shia, and it's in those regions where the population is some other religions or sects, whatever, where the uprisings are happening more, right? So majority of the population that are Shia really have, it is their heritage and faith to, praise the Ayatollah and those things. And so it's instead of like, you can't really get rid of the head of the snake here, because it's a matrix, right? It's should say cockroaches, that's bad, but
New one grows. Yeah, then there's that.
but anyway, they're and they're proud people. So I'm not sure how our current approach is well, maybe accurate, because we're so dominant militarily wise on them. They can't really even hardly defend themselves. But that also means they're going to disperse and probably be, heck, there's some I joked with somebody that there's some 7-8-year-old kid today that's he's already got in his mind that he's gonna, when he grows up, he's gonna be able to shoot missiles at those Americans, right? So unfortunately, I worry that that's we're kind of not that you should not do this to avoid that, but that's going to be a long-term problem in the region, I think.
Yeah, I mean, and looking forward, it is hard for us to keep, monitor this thing and give up real-time updates because it's so fast moving. And quite frankly, we haven't really got a lot of clarity from our administration on exactly kind of what the goals and are, which is fine because I think that to some degree that can't telegraph that, right? But one thing that from our perspective, when we're risk managers, that we're kind of just looking for other ways of forecasting what's going to happen next. And the U.S. bond market's been something that you can look at, and President Trump has reacted very in when the U.S. bond market starts to find any kind of crisis territory. That seems to be when he starts shifting his tune a little bit. So looking forward on the energy market, oil is obviously just rallying out of control. Then today it's down $10. We're starting to see all these ebbs and flows, right? But the bond market could give us a little bit more of a clean forecast, I would say. Do either one of you guys have anything to add on that?
Yeah, I would say just kind of at what point, what are kind of the signals or the kind of alarms that either the administration kind of looks at? Is it when gas prices get a certain level? Is it due to, the upcoming midterm elections? Are they trying to prepare for that? What's going to kind of force their hand? And then, I mean, I guess we talked about it just a minute ago, though. Even if they do kind of force their hand, what kind of cards do they even have to play? And right now, it doesn't seem like there's a ton of options on the table. So, in my opinion, I think it's almost more about kind of whether Iran's going to stick this out. And, we don't really have much clarity on that side of things. But, I mean, how high do you think oil can go before perhaps other nations step in? Or what's kind of going to be the thing that changes everybody's tune on this?
Demand destruction to me is kind of, that's the real end of the line of the burn, how high this goes.
Well, you would think, though, perhaps demand destruction, I mean, we're kind of already seeing it in Asia, right?
Yep.
So is the U.S. going to be a little bit more shielded than other nations from it? And is it going to come from elsewhere? Because, I mean, if you want to go demand destruction, Asian refineries are turning down their refineries, right? Because they can't get crude oil. So,
Yep.
I mean,
I'd seen a news story that in India, they do a lot of cooking with propane, and some of the people in the cities that come there to work have had to go back, they're going back to their homeland because you can't live in the city because you've got no propane anymore. And so, they'll go back and cook with wood or something. But that's a real, trouble spot. Most of Asia, that's where most of the oil goes. Like, fortunately for us, we get very little from, the Persian Gulf, and those barrels that we can do could easily be replaced, right? Because we're a net exporter of oil. We just keep a couple more barrels for ourselves. That's all we need, right? So, fortunately for us, we're in a position where, it costs a little more. But one of the things that President Trump only mentioned once, because it's probably not popular as a whole, but higher energy prices, I would submit, isn't as much of an economic drag on the United States as some people think it might be. It's obviously going to cause some inflation across the board, but and psychologically, maybe it causes people to kind of go in their shell a little bit and spend less money. So I'm not proposing that higher oil prices because we're a net exporter is actually going to lift the economy. I just think it's not going to. The situations before when we had high oil prices, we weren't exporting 3 million barrels a day. We export 1.2 million barrels a day of diesel, 3-4 million barrels of crude oil. I guess crude oil still we import a lot, but that comes from Canada, right? So they're our buddies up to the
Yeah, the net importers of the world, those are the guys that are ultimately the most affected. Asian nations across the board. I mean, I don't even know that one that doesn't ends up on the right half of that.
Yeah, I believe like either Indonesia
Yeah.
might be a net exporter overall, but yeah, overall the Asian economies, Japan, Korea,
Oh, so
China are all going to be experiencing that. But it's, I guess, how high does oil go? That's ultimately, our focus here is on what is going on in oil markets and how you can kind of handle this these market dynamics. What do you think going forward? I mean, you kind of paint a little bit of a grim picture there as to what this.
Well, I think that's a lot of the reality for what a lot of people are coming to.
So yeah, and how do you protect yourself in this case? I guess
I would jump in and share with you something I saw over the weekend. Is United Airlines came out and told their stockholders and just public statement, their current estimate is for $175 barrel oil, like in this year, and then still staying at 100 or over next year, and that's kind of a boogeyman number. But actually, when we look at what happened in 2022, there actually was no disruption. It was just fear and panic in pricing. And, oil markets were up for a long time. So I scratched my head a little bit when there's this discussion that, prices are going to fall back really quick because when we actually, if Iran, even if they, I don't know if the right term is capitulate, but if they get a deal, whatever it is, they've made it clear that they're going to use that to their advantage. And the Strait of Hormuz, which is going to be a problem for the oil markets going forward, right? One of the weird things that I throw at you guys sometimes is you look at Saudi Arabia, why did they increase output so much to get $50 crude last year? That was almost a chess move by them to get to here where Iran could be dealt with. Long term, their budget number is $90 a barrel, right? How long do they want to keep borrowing money to keep the price low for POTUS, right? It's to me that longer term, it's going to be higher. And fortunately, right now, and this was, we're talking our book, right? But you can buy stuff for next year at very reasonable prices.
I mean, even this summer, right? You get a 50. I mean, heck, I can look right now. You get a 70-cent discount if you just go buy a May delivery contract. I mean, that's remarkable. We don't see backwardation like that really ever. And with more of the sentiment shifting towards this could be a prolonged conflict, that seems to be a pretty attractive bet on my end. I mean, I think that there's option markets that are open up opportunities as well. And we can kind of elaborate on that if customers are wanting to call and ask about that stuff. This is unprecedented times, so we're using some little more unique strategies than we have, or a little more often, I would say, than we have in the past. But this is an odd time, and we need to use some odd strategies.
Yeah, when you think of also I think there's a lot of people think they've missed the boat, but it's things like we've seen Luke Combs come into Kansas City, and then before he's get really popular, he's at a casino and you can buy a ticket for $100. Then 6 months later, it's $500 to $1,000 to see him in Arrowhead, right? Well, what if you could buy? He's coming here right now this month. What if 6 months from now you could get a ticket for $200, right?
Yep.
And that's kind of where oil markets are at. Where sometimes we're like, hey, guys, it's not as good of a deal as it was 3 months ago, but it's still a good deal 6 months from now, right? Then just how do we get there? And it's not going to be normal for the market to bid those forward prices up till they're closer.
And I will say that as every day progresses, we're having a shortage, and that's building up. But then you add on, there is that East-West pipeline from Saudi Arabia that's kind of avoiding the strait. So if any disruptions happen there, that's an immediate
going to be a target.
you
would think.
it could be a target that would be, another way to disrupt the oil market even further. So,
And then also I always forget the other strait on the Red Sea, fast shipping route as well.
the Bab el-Mandeb.
Yep.
Yep.
Houthis can step in on that and potentially cause some disruptions from that angle as well. I have read some reports that they've got kind of a deal with Saudi Arabia that basically they're getting funding from Saudi Arabia, so getting paid off to keep that thing nice and fluid. But something goes wrong there, that's another safety valve that for the Saudis that could also go bad on them. There's just a lot of things that
With Saudi Arabia, we'll see who wants to, it's a game of chicken, right? Saudi Arabia has come out, we think that they encourage President Trump to do it, like, hey, we silently have your back, right? But now, when they're getting their stuff hit, they've even rebuked Iran and almost said so much as, we're going to join the fight too. But that East-West pipeline is, obviously, if I was Saudi Arabia, I'd think twice about joining the fight, because that's I don't know, is it 600 miles? It's a long stretch of pipeline. And,
It's a lot of desert to be covered there.
Yeah, you can't cover that. They're going to, I always think of it like when you think of war games and that kind of stuff, you really should think about it like, what would I do if I was them?
Yeah.
Right. And we kind of, sometimes you hear in the news like, oh, they don't, they're chumps. Iran is, we're just going to wipe them out. Well, what can you do even if you're getting beat up by this bully,
Mhm.
right? David and Goliath thing. What do you have that will still work good? And if you're going to do that, if you're going to blow up all my electric plants in my country, yeah, I'm going to probably take out the East-West pipeline. But
Yeah.
whether we see that or not, well, who knows? But
Yeah, there's plenty of other infrastructure that Iran could target as well, and that goes for all Gulf nations. So, they've got. I'm not going to say the leverage is all in their hands. They just have less to lose ultimately, and they're going to use that as their advantage. So I think that's all we want to talk about today. Do you guys want to add anything else?
No, I think that's really pretty much everything. We wanted to just kind of get an update on what's going on and kind of.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, John.
my hope is some of my grim comments don't actually come to pass, and
Yes, I think we all hope that too.
Yeah, well, we appreciate your perspective.
Yes.
You have a very unique one of, especially the combination of expertise that you have in both military and oil markets. And thank you for your service as well. We really
thank you.
appreciate it. So, all right, thanks for everybody joining today. If you guys ever have questions, you can reach out to us regarding either account opening as far as trading goes, or if you are looking to just get some advice on fuel needs in general. So, thanks for joining.
You've been listening to the Focus on Fuels podcast with Trevor McClanahan and Alex Hodes, brought to you by StoneX, NASDAQ ticker SNEX, a global Fortune 100 financial services company with a century of commodities risk management experience. Subscribe to Focus on Fuels on your preferred podcasting platform. For insights on managing fuel and energy price volatility, and to sign up for the free StoneX Morning Energy Brief newsletter, email focusonfuels@stonex.com or visit www.stonex.com. Please feel free to rate, review, and share this episode with colleagues. Until next time.